I've always believed that if you work hard, keep your head down, and treat people with respect, success will follow. For years, that belief served me well, or so I thought. When I first joined Marlowe and Finch, I was fresh out of grad school, one of the few women on my team, and determined to prove myself without playing into any office stereotypes. I didn't flirt, I didn't gossip, and I didn't suck up. I just did my job thoroughly, efficiently, and with more passion than anyone expected from someone in her 20s. Over the next 3 years, I became the go-to person for data analysis and client projections. People came to me with questions because I had the answers. My manager, Olivia, even joked once that I was her secret weapon. That meant something, especially coming from her, someone notoriously tough to impress. So when a senior associate position opened up in our department, I thought, for once, it might be my turn. I didn't say anything out loud. I didn't want to jinx it, but the signs were there. Olivia hinted during our last review that I had outgrown my current role. She asked about my long-term goals. She even told me to block off time on my calendar the following week to chat about the next steps. I went home that night on cloud 9. I wasn't just climbing the ladder, I was being seen, recognized. Everything I had quietly worked toward was finally about to materialize. And then, nothing. That calendar invite never came. A week passed. Then another. I told myself they were just working out details, or maybe waiting for end-of-quarter numbers. But then, during an all-hands Zoom, Olivia announced that Brian, the guy who joined the company only 18 months ago, had been promoted to senior associate. I stared at my screen in disbelief, trying to hold my expression steady. Everyone applauded. Brian smiled with that practiced humility he always wore. I said congrats in the chat like everyone else. But inside, I was reeling. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he had experience I didn't know about. Maybe he'd handled a big client I hadn't been looped in on. But none of it sat right. It wasn't until later that week, when I was grabbing coffee with Clara, one of the only coworkers I truly trusted, that I got my first real clue. She leaned in, almost uncomfortably close, and said quietly, "You know people have been talking about you, right?" My heart thudded. "What do you mean?" "There's this idea going around that you think you're above the rest of us. That you're gunning for Olivia's job. That you only help when there's credit involved." I blinked. "Wait, what? Who's saying that?" Clara looked away. "You didn't hear it from me." I laughed it off at the time. I had to. The idea was so absurd, so far from who I actually was, that I couldn't even wrap my head around it. But her words burrowed deep. And then I started noticing the cracks. Emails that used to include me didn't anymore. I was left out of informal brainstorming sessions. Olivia stopped making eye contact during meetings and her tone became curt, distant. I once overheard 2 teammates go silent the moment I entered the break room, their awkward smiles confirming everything Clara had said. That's when I realized I hadn't been passed over because I wasn't qualified. I'd been silenced, undermined by whispers, targeted by a rumor I didn't start and couldn't fight. And in that moment, I made a quiet promise to myself. I might not know who planted the seeds of doubt, but I was going to find out. Because if they thought I was done, they didn't know me at all. It's strange how quickly paranoia can settle into your bones. I used to walk into the office with purpose. Now I scanned every glance, every hushed whisper, every smile that didn't reach someone's eyes. I couldn't help it. Once you know people have been talking behind your back, you start wondering who, when, why, and what else. I thought I knew my coworkers. I thought they respected me. But clearly, someone had decided to weaponize a version of me that didn't exist. A cold, calculating ladder climber, the kind of woman who'd step on necks to get ahead. And worse, others had believed it. So I started watching. Not obviously, just paying attention to the patterns I used to ignore. Clara, for all her sympathy, had grown oddly distant since our coffee chat. She was still friendly, but her updates became vague, and she started declining lunch with quick excuses. I didn't press. Instead, I looked at Brian. Brian had always been charming, polished. He remembered people's birthdays. He made jokes during meetings that made Olivia laugh. He also had a habit of lingering just a little too long near her office. Harmless, maybe, but I started thinking about the timing, how quickly his star had risen. How the same week Olivia stopped inviting me to huddles, Brian started leading them. Coincidence? Maybe, but I'd learned better than to believe in coincidences in the corporate world. One Thursday afternoon, I stayed late, partly because I wanted quiet time to finish a report, and partly because I needed space to think. As I walked past the break room on my way to refill my tea, I heard voices. I paused at the doorway when I recognized one. Brian. I mean, come on, he was saying with a chuckle. She's great at what she does, but let's be honest, she makes people uncomfortable. She acts like she's running the place. Then came another voice. Karen from accounting. Totally. She never smiles. Always looks like she's judging you. Laughter. I stood there frozen, clutching my mug, staring at the vending machine like it had personally betrayed me. They didn't know I was there. They were just talking. Casual. Comfortable. Like it was normal to destroy someone's reputation over drinks and chips. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on my couch, replaying the moment like a loop tape, trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong. The answer? I hadn't. What had gone wrong was them, their insecurities, their politics, their need to tear someone down to feel taller. I was just the convenient target. A woman who didn't gossip, who didn't drink at happy hour, who didn't play the game. And that made me dangerous. I wanted to storm into Olivia's office and explain everything, but I knew how that would go. I'd look defensive, bitter, worse, emotional. The same trope they were already painting me with. So instead, I changed tactics. I started collecting receipts. Every shift in behavior. Every exclusion. Every public praise for Brian over projects I led. Every meeting where I was suddenly double-booked and uninvited. I built a quiet record, not for revenge, but for clarity. If I was going to fight back, I needed proof. And then came the final straw, the anonymous 360 feedback survey that got leaked. A line from my evaluation was read aloud during a leadership training I wasn't invited to attend, but later heard about. She lacks emotional intelligence and often isolates herself from team dynamics. That one stung more than any rumor, because it was supposed to be anonymous. And someone had used the perfect weapon, a trusted tool, to twist the knife. But they didn't know I'd already figured out who submitted it. And they had no idea I was about to flip the narrative they'd built, piece by piece. It's ironic, really. I had spent 3 years becoming the kind of employee everyone said they wanted. Quiet, efficient, drama-free. But in the end, that made it easier for them to erase me. Well, not anymore. After the leaked feedback incident, I knew things wouldn't fix themselves. If I wanted to reclaim my reputation, I'd have to act. Not emotionally, but strategically. And fortunately for me, strategy was something I excelled at. I started with information. Clara was my first target, or rather, my first test. One Monday morning, I casually mentioned a fake rumor that Olivia was planning to split the analytics team into 2 branches, one led by Brian. I even confided that I was worried about layoffs. I didn't say it to anyone else. By Thursday afternoon, 2 people I barely spoke to had already pulled me aside with concerned faces and awkward. So, heard anything about restructuring? Gotcha. Clara was the leak. It stung more than I expected. I'd trusted her. Listened to her complain about her ex, brought her soup when she was sick, even defended her during that one awkward budget call when she completely messed up a projection. But friendship doesn't mean much when office politics are in play. Still, now I knew the battlefield. I kept playing the game. In meetings, I started speaking up more. Calmly, clearly, confidently. When Brian interrupted me, which he often did, I'd pause, smile, and say, "I'll finish my thought, and then you can jump in." Not confrontational, just firm. I also reached out to cross-department teams. I offered insights, volunteered for tricky tasks, and followed up with summaries that included everyone involved, making sure credit was publicly and undeniably shared. My name was on everything, but I wasn't the only one benefiting. And that made people start listening again. The shift was slow, but real. I could see it in the way Olivia started asking for my opinion again. In the way people nodded when I spoke instead of pretending to check their phones. I wasn't fixed in their eyes, not yet, but I was harder to ignore. Then came the quarterly client meeting. Brian was set to present our biggest account, but he'd made one crucial mistake, relying on outdated figures. The day before the call, I noticed the error. A forecasting slide based on last quarter's model, not the updated trend we'd just analyzed. I could have let it slide. Let him fumble. Let the client lose confidence. Let Olivia finally see what I already knew. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed late and rebuilt the entire deck, updated the figures, reformatted the charts, added notes for talking points. I didn't tell anyone. I just sent it to Olivia at midnight with a subject line, updated forecasts, more accurate reflection. The next day, she opened the right file. Brian didn't even realize it had been changed. The meeting went flawlessly. The client praised our precision. And for the first time in weeks, Olivia looked directly at me after the call and said, "Well done." I didn't smile. I just nodded. Later that afternoon, Brian dropped by my desk. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, and gave me the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "You're playing the long game, huh?" he said. I looked up. "I'm just doing my job." He held my gaze for a beat too long, then shrugged and walked away. But in that moment, I knew he knew. And I wasn't done yet, because I still hadn't confronted the source of that anonymous feedback. And when I finally did, it would be in a place where they couldn't hide behind whispers. I didn't plan to confront Olivia, not right away. I knew better than to walk into her office with a speech and expect a redemption arc. No, if I wanted to make this count, it had to be at the right time and with the right ammunition. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A few weeks later, HR rolled out a new internal initiative, Voices That Matter, a series of roundtable sessions designed to address team dynamics, transparency, and growth. Each department had to nominate one person to represent them in the first round. Olivia nominated Brian. But then, something unexpected happened. Two other department heads, both of whom I'd recently collaborated with, emailed HR directly and asked if I could be included. I was told this in passing by Marisol, one of the HR reps, in the elevator. "You've got fans in unexpected places," she said, smiling. For the first time in a long while, I smiled back, genuinely. The session was scheduled for a Friday morning. It was held in one of the larger boardrooms, with 12 employees and 2 HR facilitators seated around a sleek, glossy table. Name tags, coffee, little bowls of mints, the works. We were asked to discuss moments when we felt overlooked, undervalued, or misrepresented. I listened, took notes, nodded in solidarity. And then it was my turn. I didn't name names. I didn't even mention the promotion. But I told them about the shift, how one week I was being prepped for advancement, and the next, I was suddenly unapproachable, intimidating, and too independent. I told them how none of that feedback had ever come to my face, only through whispers and leaked surveys. I let silence sit in the room after I finished. Heavy, uncomfortable. One of the facilitators cleared her throat and said, "It takes courage to speak up like that." "Thank you." Later that day, Olivia called me into her office. It had been months since I'd been in there for anything other than logistics. The door was half open when I arrived. She was staring at her monitor, lips pursed. She didn't look up until I sat down. "That session," she said slowly. "I heard what you shared." I met her eyes. I spoke honestly. "I know," she replied. "That's why I wanted to ask. Why didn't you come to me directly?" there it was, the gatekeeper's defense. If only you'd said something, I could have helped you. As if silence were the problem. As if I hadn't tried, through work, through commitment, through every late night and missed weekend. So I told her the truth. Because by the time I realized what was happening, the decision had already been made. You stopped inviting me to meetings. You stopped asking for my input. And when I tried to stay visible, it only seemed to make things worse. She shifted in her seat, defensive posture rising. I made the decision I thought was best for the team. I believe that, I said gently, cutting her off. But I also believe that decision was made based on incomplete information. Biased information. Her lips tightened. I didn't expect her to admit it. People in power rarely do, especially not when they're part of the bias without realizing it. But something softened in her gaze. I underestimated the effect of the culture we've let grow here, she finally said. That's on me. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. But it was acknowledgement. And that was more than I thought I'd ever get. Before I left, she added, I've been thinking about restructuring the mentorship program. We could use someone with your insight. Someone who understands how the cracks form and how to stop them. I paused at the door. I'll think about it, I said. Because in that moment, I knew I didn't just want to fix what had happened to me. I wanted to build something better, so it didn't happen to the next woman who stayed late, kept her head down, and believed that hard work was enough. After that conversation with Olivia, something shifted, not just in how she treated me, but in how I saw myself. I used to walk through the office like I was a guest. Like my seat could be taken at any moment. But now every step I took felt steadier. Like I belonged. Not because someone said so, or because my name was finally on some shortlist, but because I knew who I was and what I brought to the table. The mentorship program Olivia mentioned? I took it. At first, I hesitated. Part of me was still hurt, still wary of giving more to a company that had almost buried me with whispers. But then I thought about the women I worked with, the ones who were still quiet, still playing the game the way I used to. And I realized someone had to hold the door open for them, and if not me, then who? So I built the program from scratch. We started small, just 5 junior analysts, each paired with someone more experienced. Not to talk about KPIs or productivity hacks, but about navigating the culture. How to advocate for themselves without being labeled difficult. How to push back without being cast as emotional. How to be seen without being misunderstood. Word spread. Within 3 months, HR was asking me to consult on department-wide inclusion strategies. Within 6, our little mentorship pilot became a permanent initiative. And something else happened too. Brian, golden boy, backroom whisperer, started to fade. Not all at once. He still wore the same confident grin. Still charmed his way through meetings. But people weren't laughing quite as hard at his jokes anymore. His suggestions started getting second-guessed. His shortcuts, which used to be seen as clever, started looking like exactly what they were, lazy. Because when the system starts shifting, the people who thrived on manipulation start slipping. And I didn't have to lift a finger. One day, about 9 months after that infamous client meeting, Olivia stopped me in the hallway. She had that same unreadable expression she always wore when about to say something important. I've put in your name for the next director-level opening, she said. You're not just ready, you're overdue. I didn't smile immediately. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because I wanted to feel it, to let it land. This wasn't just a promotion. It was a reclamation. Not just of my career, but of my voice, my place, my worth. And the next time someone tried to tear down a woman in that office with casual comments over coffee or whispered lies behind closed doors, they'd find something different waiting for them. Not silence, not retreat, but me and others like me. Ready to speak up, to stand firm, and to remind them. You can't bury someone who's already learned how to grow through concrete.